the Senate will not be bullied. We are doing our work in the interest of Nigerians. And by the time we come up with our final position, it will reflect the yearnings and aspirations of Nigerians. And not only that, any reform that we can make, painful as the reform may be, so long as this Senate is convinced that it is in the interest of Nigerians, we will go ahead with it with a view to bringing our economy on a forward march.
All right, welcome back. Yes, indeed, we're back to talking about the tax bill. Some developments that came through from the Senate yesterday. And as you may have seen, we're joined by Senator Abba Moro, who is the minority leader and also chairs the committee that will be leading their colleagues to meet with the government delegation. Good morning, Senator. Thank you for joining us on the program today.
Thank you, Chamberlain. It's my pleasure to be with you.
Okay, so go ahead and tell us. We understand this committee was adjusted. What informed that in the first instance?
Well, it is a normal process. And the following day, it was discovered that the chief whip of the Senate was in a committee, and by Senate procedures, the chief whip of the Senate ranks higher than the Senate minority leader, and it was felt that it was a little anachronistic for apparently a higher ranking member of the Senate being a member of a committee chaired by the minority leader, who by our ranking is lower than the chief whip of the Senate by parliamentary procedure. And so it was thought that to give room for free flow of ideas and adjustments in what we're trying to do, the whip of the Senate should step down for an equivalent person that will be in tune with our procedure. And so that is what happened. I think it was an innocuous adjustment to give room for a level playing ground.
Okay, so some dailies are reporting this morning that the president of the Senate overruled his deputy about the bill being withdrawn. Was it an overruling? Was it considered a slip of tongue or what? Because he had to restate that the bill has not been withdrawn.
Well, I don't see it as an overruling as such. The Deputy Senate President presided over the session before the arrival, on the next day, the Senate President presided over the session. And this idea of setting up a committee, the idea of interfacing with the executive on the bills before the House was muted on Thursday, the previous week. And so the list was drawn. And of course, under normal circumstances, adjustments are permissible. And that is what was done. And I think it doesn't have any insinuation of one overruling the other. It's just a mere adjustment of a membership and procedures to adopt in the process. Don't forget that the Senate on same Thursday had taken the second reading of the bills and had given the Finance Committee 6 weeks within which to report back to the Senate. And so within this period of 6 weeks, adjustments are permissible. Even as we go forward, when it is discovered that maybe the right things have not been done, just like we're trying to review the tax reform bills now, it's within our rules to adjust appropriately to get the thing right.
Okay, because what would you say to those who thought that, or still think that for them, the bill hasn't gotten to that stage where you gather a lot of observations from the members on the floor So what kind of observations is your committee going to be taking to the presidential team, or what do we expect from your committee, basically?
By, by our parliamentary procedure, a bill is introduced, it goes through first reading, it goes through a second reading. At the second stage of that second reading, debates are conducted, especially in this instance, as an executive bill, the leader of the Senate led the debate, and it was referred to the Senate, appropriate Senate Committee of Finance to carry on from there, which is the next stage, the third stage, the third reading. And before the third reading, public hearings are held when it is necessary. And so at every level of the procedure, especially at the second reading, debates are permitted, and that was what happened. So the third stage now is the consideration of the committee, and the committee is at liberty to call for public hearing, to receive inputs from members of the public and critical stakeholders. And so that is exactly what is happening. So the idea of stepping down of course, the Senate can step down a bill, but withdrawing a bill is a prerogative of the person who introduces the bill. And that is what we are saying here. And so I think that the necessary adjustment had been made to correct maybe an apparent anomaly.
So this is going to be done, the meeting with the executive team is going to be done before the public hearing. So is there a time limit within which this engagement has to happen for your committee?
No, there's no time limit as such, but the expediency of the moment dictates that my committee must work assiduously, speedily, to ensure that we conclude our proceedings within the 6 weeks to enable the Senate committee to carry on from there.
I want to be able to get clarification on that. Does that mean that the time frame for these negotiations is 6 weeks? These discussions and debates, is that what that means?
No. What this means is that the subcommittee of the Senate, the ad hoc committee that I chair, must carry out its duty as quickly as possible to provide time within the 6 weeks to enable the Senate Committee on Finance to conclude its own proceedings and report to the Senate. And as I said, on that very day, the next day, we hit the ground running. We started our preliminary meeting. On Tuesday, we had another meeting. On Thursday, we had another meeting. And we are holding another meeting next week, Tuesday. I want to think that with the speed unturned, we should be able within 2 weeks to conclude our own proceedings and submit our findings to the Senate Committee on Finance, which now has the responsibility of further sensitizing the public and synthesizing the whole bill process, ensuring that all
I think we're having a bit of a connection issue there with the senator, because, you know, with these tax bills, I think we have him back. Senator, just so we can move on with another question, you know, one of the issues that people have had with these tax bills, you know, and we had the president of the Academic Staff Union of Universities here on the program with us, saying there's no, the consultations that were necessary to before it got to the National Assembly had to be done. I want to be able to get from you, in the consultations and the debates that are going to be happening in the next few weeks, do we have ASU on that roster? You know, and what kinds of meetings are you expecting to have, you know, in the next few weeks?
Well, if it is necessary, definitely ASU will be involved. But our mandate is to interface with the executive. But in interfacing with the executive, there are perceptions out there about the pros and cons of this bill. And all Nigerians, all critical stakeholders in Nigeria are within the ambit of our regulation to be interfaced with. And so if it becomes necessary to get input from ASU, definitely this committee will invite them. I can assure you that as representatives of the people, we as senators are open to all kinds of inputs on critical issues that affect the life of our people. Don't forget that this is an executive bill, and it's an executive bill that will lead to policies flowing from it that will affect the lives of all Nigerians. And so all Nigerians, quite frankly, are allowed to make inputs. Yesterday, I got a call from Nigeria's former ambassadors to Saudi Arabia, and he said he wanted to come and share with me his views, his ideas about the tax bill and the controversy, the debates that are going on. And instantly, I asked him to come over, and he came over from KB and came to the Senate, and we interfaced, we interacted, and he gave me his own idea of what he thinks that some of the provisions of the tax bills should be. And so, in the same vein, ASU definitely, as a very, very serious critical stakeholder in the enterprise of Nigeria, is free to submit its ideas of what the taxes should be if they do not agree with what is on the paper already.
I want to be able to get your thoughts on this up and down, because what's happening is Nigerians are watching, and what we're told from one side is that these tax bills are beneficial to us. They will help the Nigerian people. Then we heard the northern governors, then we had the National Executive Council, and then now we're seeing, you know, pull it back. Let's have a few conversations around it. What do you make of these mixtures of emotions and feelings when it comes to these tax bills, and how should the Nigerian people, you know, react to all of these controversies that surround these bills that they've been told will be beneficial to them?
Yeah, I can tell you straight away here that having gone through the tax bills, that there's no doubt that a sizable part of the tax bill is beneficial to Nigerians. Don't forget, too, that in one of his sessions with the National Assembly, Mr. President has said that he was going to plug all loopholes, all leakages in our finance processes of either collection or distribution. And so I think this is one of the areas that the president thinks that he can plug these leakages of our finances. And so the controversies, what is perceived here as controversies, are just observations of very senior and critical stakeholders like the governors that preside over the states. And genuinely, they are expressing some concern about the whole process of tax collection, the whole process of VAT collection, and of course, the concomitant distribution of these monies or funds. And they are concerned that some of the provisions of the tax bills erode the power of the states, of subnationals, to also conduct their own mandates. And so this is the area that all of us must be concerned with. This is the area that all of us must be able to address. And because these bills, when they pass into law, affect all of us. And so we don't try to solve a problem by creating another problem. And that is why I congratulate the president for being at least saying some of these things are not okay. And the president, in his exemplary leadership, has said, look, let's look at it again. If what has been brought out is not in the overall interest of all Nigerians or a majority of Nigerians, then let's look at it. And that is what we want to do. We want to look at the areas of concern by some of these critical stakeholders, especially the governors, and see how we can reconcile and make sure that all of us are carried along. because in executing our policies, everybody must be taken into consideration so that we're on the same page. Otherwise, implementation becomes a problem.
Let me start with the angle of the governors that you talked about. You know, one would have quite a number of issues on that, but one would have expected perhaps that maybe the representatives, senators and the members of the House of Representatives would also have some conversations with their governors to say, look, this is our perspective of this thing. It's going to bring this benefit. These are things that we think we need to correct or adjust in the bills because ultimately it has some benefits even though it has some areas of concern. Do you think that will sway this conversation in any particular way, positively or negatively? Because one is wondering, why have these issues when the representatives of the people in the National Assembly can't speak with their governors?
Yeah, this is exactly what is going on. I can assure you that representatives of the senators and the representatives of the governors have had an interface. And of course, what you have expressed now is what we have also been able to tell some of our governors. I was in a conversation with the governor of Bauchi State yesterday, and we agreed that there is a need for some building of some level of consensus on some of the issues. Perceptions are out there. Of course, sometimes, you know, perceptions are a reality. But what we want to do, especially with this committee, is to ensure that some of the wrong impressions that have been gotten by some people about these tax bills are corrected. And where there is an obvious disconnect between the presenters of the tax bills, in this case, the executive, and some segments of Nigeria, we want to reconcile all these contending tendencies and to ensure that eventually when we come out with the tax bill passed by the National Assembly, it will be acceptable to all Nigerians, or at least a greater size of Nigerians. That is the process that we are going on. I don't want to jump the ship by telling you some of the things that we have observed so far, some of the observations that we have made, and the recommendations that we are going to make to bring forth a comprehensive adjustment in these bills to ensure that all Nigerians are carried along. And that's why I say, look, Mr. President has demonstrated some level of statesmanship by being a listening president and saying, hey, there is some concern here being expressed by Nigerians. Please interface, especially some aspects of the bill that appear to conflict with the provisions of the Constitution or that we feel is an overreach. It's not only about the governors, it's about all Nigerians. Like you said now, ASU has some perspective on this idea, on these bills. And so we want to listen to all Nigerians. We are representatives of the people. In other clans, like the American system, when legislations are proposed, constituents write to their representatives to say, hey, this is our position. And so that is exactly what we are doing. We try to synthesize all these things and ensure that by the time this bill is passed, the Senate and the National Assembly, as a matter of fact, is not seen to have pandered to any particular tendency against the interests of Nigerians. We want a holistic view of the whole thing and come up with an acceptable legislation.
You know, the angle to it, I mean, glad that you could mention all the things that you talked about, you know, the consultations and everything. Given the way that the issue has been addressed by a good number of people, quite a number of them politicians, there are those who are wondering, wait, are you sure this is not just some political permutations going on by some people? Some dailies, for instance, in the course of this week, reported it in a particular way, saying it's North against South, it's politics and all of that. So how do we sway people to help them understand the politics of it and the spirit of the bills? Because there are those who are saying it more as a political instrument as opposed to whatever it is that the way you and a number of other people are seeing it.
Well, let me tell you that we are senators of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. There is no doubt that when issues like this come up, political innuendos will be thrown into it. There's no doubt about it. You see some political appointees and aides of governors and president insinuating that there are political undertones and the rest of them. This I cannot certify, but I can tell you that as senators of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, our concern here is the bill that is before us. What is in it for Nigerians? What is it that people are saying, hey, look at it again, it's not good. We want to look at it dispassionately without trying to activate another round of debate about the North-South dichotomy. Of course, as it is now, I can tell you, some governments in the North are expressing some concern that as it is now, as presented, the bill appears to be gravitating from population and equality as a basis for sharing some of the collections that will be made towards consumption-based model. And they are saying, if you do that, some of the northern states are agrarian states. They produce agricultural products that are moved to big cities like Lagos for processing. If you base it on consumption and you base it on derivation, the North will be disaffected. The North will lose substantial funds. Some permutate between 15 to 20 billion will be lost in these states, which also goes to affect their desire to make infrastructural provisions for their areas. And so these are the concerns. If you look at it, derivation is in the Constitution. If you now introduce a new derivation without first amending the provisions of the Constitution that provides for derivation and certain products, of course, we'll be going against the Constitution. And that means that whatever law that we pass on the basis of this situation now will be in conflict with the Constitution. And between me and you, you know that any law passed by the National Assembly or by the State House of Assembly that are in conflict with the Constitution are being issued. It's a nullity.
Yeah.
And so that is the position that we are taking here to make sure that the proper thing is done in the process, that we do not throw away the baby with the bathwater.
Well, Senator, I'm looking at some findings. I just did a quick search on something. I'm asking about fiscal federalism, which refers to financial relationships and arrangements between federal and different other levels of government in a federal system of government. And when you look at the key components of fiscal federalism, the number one on the list, Senator, is tax assignments, which talks about which level of government collects specific types of taxes and all of that. Is this process, are these bills in any way an instrument of fiscal federalism?
Well, again, that is a point of contention, that some state governments are saying that if you go by the provisions of this current tax bill or bills, it may erode the power of subnations to collect revenues. That is a perception. So until we get to the basics, until we ensure that these fears are allayed, every other thing continues to be on the face of speculation or perception. When I talked with a critical stakeholder yesterday, and I said, hey, you have complained about this and that and that. Do you have a position paper on this thing that you can avail this committee so that we can now address your concern? He said, well, he doesn't have right away, but he thinks that it is somewhere. And I said, okay, please search for it and make it available to us so that we do not create unnecessary controversy about, by my own standard, this well-intentioned reform.
All right, Senator, as we wind down on this one, would it be out of place, for instance, for perhaps some consideration as to, because now a lot of focus is on the bill, what accrues to the states, because governors, I mean, the executive ceding 5%, increasing what goes to the state and VAT. But what usually happens to a lot of these monies may be lost in all of this conversation. So would it be out of place for that conversation to happen on the floor of the Senate, to mandate, for instance, to ensure that there's a lot of prudence and fiscal discipline, so that after all of this, and then the bill is signed, and then they still don't use it for developmental purposes?
Well, Chairman, you know as I do that we have appropriate legislations, appropriate acts and laws in this country on fiscal responsibility. Of course, you know, between me and you that it has not prevented malfeasance or infractions on the provisions. It's certainly a story for another day. But what our concern is sure that we have, in tandem with the executive, a tax reform that will make available funds for the federal and state governments and local governments to perform their duties.
All right.
Whether they perform their duties or not, certainly between me and you, is a story for another day. But certainly we will make sure that in this process of passing these tax reform bills, we will ensure that all loopholes are plugged, all leakages are plugged, and ensure that the funds that will accrue will be used for what they are intended for.
All right. So when is the first meeting going to be between your committee and the executive team?
Well, we're looking at next week. We've got some documents, we've got some suggestions. We are waiting for more. We are looking out for more. By the time we get all this, our proposed meeting on Tuesday will try to synthesize all these views and look at those areas that are in contention and make appropriate recommendations. I can assure you that I won't be in a proper place now to divulge what we are thinking until we have made our findings and we have submitted to the Senate. And I can assure you that I can make myself available by the time we finish our assignment to share with you what we have presented and the reason why we have presented what we have presented.
All right, we'll look forward to that as well. Thank you very much indeed, Senator Abba Moro, Minority Leader, and chairs the committee from the Senate that will be meeting with the executive. We will be back in a moment. There's yet more perspective on this matter, so stay on with us.